こんにちは、キムテイです。皆さんは元気ですか？私は元気ですよ。So a few months ago, I asked on my Twitter and my Facebook group for any questions related to learning Japanese that I could answer on this video. I am going to continue to work on my Learn Japanese from Scratch videos, but in the meantime, I thought it'd be nice to gather some of your questions on the comment section of this video and basically start an ongoing series of Q&A videos. So without further ado, let's get into the list of questions I have to answer in this video. Mara asks, what, when, where was your first encounter with the Japanese language, and what are the resources that you've used back in the day? You know, there wasn't Takehim's guide back then, wink. So I started learning Japanese in college over 10 years ago. And back then, there was no Hulu or electronic books or all the various resources that you have today. But the www.jdic online dictionary website was there and has been there for a long time. What I can say is while I did take Japanese class in college, almost none of the other students in my class were able to successfully learn Japanese to fluency because they had the expectation that all you had to do was attend class to learn the language. And there was nothing wrong with my Japanese class. It was a pretty good class overall, but the fact is you can't learn a language just by taking class by itself. And what I did was I spent a lot of time with the language assistant that helped with the classes and spent a lot of time learning grammar and talking about grammar and what's the difference between tada and ba and nara and all that kind of stuff, before there was any material online to read. And I try to get my hands on any kind of Japanese reading material that I could find, whether it was in the campus library, and it was a lot of obscure stuff that really wasn't that much entertaining, but it was kind of all that I had at the time. And I extensively used the online dictionary to look up hundreds and hundreds and thousands of words. The important part about having that online dictionary is the speed in which you can look up words. So once you get used to the multi-radical kanji search method, and once you get once you kind of figure out a lot of the readings as you go, you can kind of type, copy, paste, and piecemeal and really just quickly look up words as opposed to using the paper kanji dictionaries and the kokugo dictionaries that we had at the library. Of course, I also spent a lot of time doing conversation practice with the Japanese exchange students on campus, outside of class. And so it really comes down to a basic formula of a lot of reading, conversation practice, and learning a lot of words. As for the grammar, since a lot of the colloquial casual stuff wasn't covered in the textbook, a lot of it was just kind of stuff that I had to figure out using dictionary if it happened to be in a dictionary, and just a lot of trial and looking at examples, which is kind of the reason why I wrote the grammar guide in the first place. Okay, the next question by Bailey Armstrong is, how do you suggest improving listening? Again, the answer is pretty simple and yet also difficult to do, which is a lot more listening practice. There are tons of resources now. There's Japanese Pod, which has quite a bit of audio material that you can use for listening practice. Of course, conversation practice is probably the best way to improve listening because you can stop the person and ask or what to repeat or slow down. And there's actually a funny story on this topic because when I first started working as a developer in Japan, I had trouble listening or understanding a lot of what the people were saying. And it's because all the language assistants and all the practice that I've had in conversation were mostly with women. So when I went to work as a developer and almost everyone were men, it was kind of hard to get used to their tone, the way of speaking. And so really it comes down to getting a lot of listening practice from a lot of different types of speakers and just getting out there. And it's kind of the simplest answer, but also the hardest thing to do because, of course, a lot of people aren't in Japan or in an area where there's a lot of Japanese speakers. There's Skype and online conversation tools, but there's a time lag as well. And I know how difficult it is, but it really comes down to a lot of listening material and conversation practice if you can come to some sort of arrangement for that. The next question from Ryan Wood is, when you receive corrections, how do you go about analyzing them if you don't have a teacher? This is a very good question because I believe corrections is one of the best tools that you have for learning Japanese, which is to make mistakes, to explore, to kind of get out there, but also to always correct yourself so that you don't you don't get into any bad habits. Now, what I like to do with corrections is to take as many as I can, just take a lot of corrections and not necessarily take it for 100% truth because language is a very complicated thing and there's lots of different ways to say lots of different things. So my answer would be the best way to analyze them is don't analyze them. Just take it as one point of fact or opinion and kind of compare it with what you've learned and what you've seen up till now and any other corrections that you see down the road. So basically just get as many corrections as you can and just kind of see how they all gel and work together over time. And just because someone is a native speaker doesn't mean that they can't make mistakes or haven't really fully thought about their language. I mean, I'm a native English speaker and people ask me questions about English that I can't answer all the time, and there's all sorts of things that I don't know. So it's important to get as many corrections as possible and just to take it as yet another data point. A Sad Man Blue asks, what's the best way to study vocab? I always have trouble coming up with words I'll need to know. So this question is what I would call a honmatsu tento, or putting the cart before the horse. What you want to do is find things that interest you in Japanese, whether it's talking to people or whether it's your hobbies. You might be interested in, of course, what's very popular is anime or manga. But of course, similar to that, it could be light novels, it could be literature. There's tons of world famous novelists such as Murakami Haruki. There's all sorts of hobbies, kendo, sado, there's, Japan is rich in culture, and more likely than not, there's a reason why you're learning Japanese. So that's how you should be coming up with the words you'll need to know, not trying to find words to learn just for the sake of learning them, but having an interest and having words come out of that you learn in the process. And so the last question is by Abdallah, and that is what to do after learning 701st Joyo Kanji. It is a serious question, by the way. Well, I do think that the question is serious, but it invites more questions on my part, which is, what do you mean by learning the first 700 kanji? I think when someone said they learned the kanji, I think there's a lot of ambiguousness there in terms of what did you learn? Did you learn the reading? Did you learn the stroke order? Did you learn word compounds? But personally, I think while we all have our individual methods that work for us for learning kanji, whatever you consider to be learning kanji and whatever methods you're using, at the end of the day, you still need to learn words. And so what I suggest, not necessarily after learning a set number of kanji really, but at any time in your studies, is to figure out what you want to accomplish in your Japanese studies. I think we all have the same end goal, which is to be, perfectly fluent in Japanese, and whatever perfect means. Of course, nobody is perfectly fluent in any language, but regardless, there's priorities. Some people might be studying Japanese because they're interested in the literature. Again, it comes to your own interests and needs. Some people might be working in Japan and they need to get up to speed in their work environment. Some people might have family that they want to communicate with, and it really comes down to the basics. I think one mistake that many people make is to treat Japanese language as any other subject of study, especially if they're taking classes. So they treat it like math or history or any kind of subject where you're learning facts and solving problems. I think it's better to treat language like a skill, such as, mountain climbing or swimming or juggling. So based on your needs and what's driving you to learn Japanese, you should focus on the skills that apply to you most. If I go back to the example of learning Japanese to communicate with your family, I would say that conversation practice should be your primary goal, and you should try to do as much of it as possible. So it's a very simple formula of, in order to accomplish what I want, I need to be able to do this. And in order to get better at doing this, I just need to do more of it. So practice, practice, practice is really all that it comes down to. For example, one recent question that I got on my Twitter account was, how can I improve my conversation skills? And so of course I'll reply, well, how many hours do you spend a week practicing conversation? And the answer was practically none. So of course there's no way you're going to get good at conversation unless you actually practice conversation. So I think if you take that philosophy or mentality to all aspects of your studies, then you'll be able to succeed in your goals. So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this first video in this new Q&A series, and make sure to put your own questions related to learning Japanese, please, in the comments below. And finally, I have a question for you guys as well. It'd be great to see your answers in the comments as well, which is, where does your interest in Japanese lie in terms of hobbies or other kinds of media? It would be great if I could incorporate some of the things that interest you guys in any future videos, though no promises at this time. And of course, feel free to ask your question in Japanese as well if you prefer. 日本語で質問していただければ、こちらからも日本語で答えますので、日本語でもぜひよろしくお願いします。どうでしたか？これでちょっと参考になりましたでしょうか？これから上級者の皆さんのためにも、何かビデオを作っていきたいと思ってるんですけれども、今はちょっとどういう形になるかわからない段階なんですが、とりあえずはこの Q&A ビデオで日本語で何か話題を振ってくれれば、それに対して日本語でお答えしますので、これからもよろしくお願いします。ありがとうございました。